It was a bright Tuesday morning when Sarah Jenkins hurried through the doors of Hope Valley Rehabilitation Center. She was running 10 minutes late for her volunteer shift, something that rarely happened to her. As a nurse at Atlanta General Hospital, Sarah always made sure to be punctual, but today her car had refused to start, forcing her to wait for a cab. The rehabilitation center had become her second home over the past year. Every Tuesday and Thursday, after her hospital shifts, she would spend 2 hours helping out wherever she was needed. Sometimes she assisted the physical therapists, and other times she simply sat and talked with the patients. The staff and regular visitors had grown used to seeing her warm smile and bright orange scrubs making their way through the hallways. On this particular morning, Sarah noticed something different. There were excited voices coming from the computer room, a space that usually sat empty during her volunteer hours. Curious, she peeked through the glass door and saw a group of teenagers gathered around someone in a wheelchair. They were all leaning forward, clearly engaged in whatever was being explained to them. "And that's how you create your first piece of code," a deep, cheerful voice said. "Who wants to try it on their own?" Several hands shot up, accompanied by eager voices. Sarah couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. She watched as the man in the wheelchair moved smoothly between the computer stations, checking on each student's progress. Despite being seated, he had a commanding presence that drew everyone's attention. During a quiet moment, Sarah slipped into the room to get some supplies from the cabinet. The man noticed her and wheeled himself over with practiced ease. "You must be Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Thompson. The staff mentioned you might come by today. They say you're the guardian angel of this place." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. Up close, she noticed his kind brown eyes and the way they crinkled at the corners when he smiled. His wheelchair was sleek and modern, clearly customized to his needs, and he sat in it with a natural confidence that spoke of years of adaptation. "I'm hardly an angel," she replied, shaking his hand. "Just trying to help where I can. This is new, though. I've never seen the computer room so full of life." Marcus grinned, gesturing to the busy teenagers. "These kids are from the local high school. Most of them don't have computers at home, so we're giving them a head start in coding. It's my way of giving back. Technology changed my life after the accident, and I want to share that opportunity with others." Before Sarah could respond, one of the students called out for help. Marcus excused himself with another warm smile and wheeled over to assist. Sarah found herself watching him work, impressed by his patience and the way he explained complex concepts in simple terms that the teenagers could understand. Throughout her shift, Sarah kept finding reasons to pass by the computer room. Each time she did, she heard laughter and excited conversations about websites, apps, and future possibilities. The energy was infectious, and she noticed how Marcus never lost his enthusiasm, even when explaining the same concept multiple times. As the coding class wrapped up, Sarah was organizing supplies in a nearby room when Marcus wheeled in. "Same time next week?" he asked casually, though there was a hint of something more in his voice. "I'm always here Tuesdays and Thursdays," Sarah replied, trying to sound equally casual while her heart did an unexpected flip. "Perfect. Maybe next time you can tell me what made you choose to volunteer here. I found that people who give their time so freely usually have the most interesting stories." With that, he turned his wheelchair around and headed out, leaving Sarah with a smile she couldn't quite explain. As she watched him skillfully navigate through the doorway, she realized that this Tuesday morning, despite its rough start, had brought something unexpected into her life. What Sarah didn't know then was that this chance encounter would be the beginning of a story far more remarkable than anything she could have imagined. A story that would challenge her perceptions, test her strength, and ultimately change her life in ways she never thought possible. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Sarah found herself looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays more than ever before. She and Marcus had fallen into an easy routine of sharing lunch breaks between his coding classes and her volunteer work. Today, they sat in the rehabilitation center's small garden, enjoying sandwiches and conversation. "My mother thinks I'm crazy," Sarah said, looking down at her food. "When I told her I was having lunch with someone I met here, she got excited. But when I mentioned you use a wheelchair, she got quiet. Then when I said you were white," she shook her head, remembering her mother's shocked expression. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My sister had a similar reaction. She asked if I was sure I wanted to date again at all, let alone start something that might face extra challenges. He adjusted his position in his wheelchair, something Sarah had noticed he did when deep in thought. But you know what? I told her that challenges are what make life interesting. Their friendship had been growing stronger each day, but both knew they were standing, or in Marcus's case, sitting, at the edge of something more. The rehabilitation center staff had noticed their lunches together, and the teenagers in Marcus's coding class had started teasing him about his nurse friend. One evening, after his class had finished, Marcus waited for Sarah to complete her volunteer duties. "Would you like to get dinner somewhere that doesn't have hospital cafeteria food?" he asked, his usual confidence slightly shaken. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "I'd love to," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But you should know, some people might stare." Marcus smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Let them stare. They'll see two people enjoying each other's company. That's all that matters." Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. As they entered, Sarah noticed some curious glances from other diners. Some looking at Marcus's wheelchair, others at their different skin colors. But as soon as they started talking, the rest of the world faded away. Marcus told her about the car accident 5 years ago that had changed his life. He had been a software developer then, and after the accident, he used his skills to create adaptive technology for others with disabilities. "The wheelchair isn't who I am," he explained. "It's just my means of getting around." Sarah shared stories about her family, her protective mother, her father who had passed away when she was young, and her younger brother who was serving in the military. She told him about her journey to becoming a nurse and her dream of eventually opening a community health clinic. As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. They faced challenges, of course. Sarah's mother, Linda, initially refused to meet Marcus, worried about her daughter's future. "Life is hard enough," she had said during one heated phone call. "Why are you choosing to make it harder?" But Sarah stood her ground. "Mom, when I'm with Marcus, life doesn't feel hard. It feels right." Marcus had his own battles to fight. His wealthy family, while more accepting of Sarah's race, worried that he was rushing into a relationship without considering the practical implications of his disability. His younger sister, Kate, pulled him aside at a family dinner. "Are you sure she's not just with you because she's a nurse? Because she feels sorry for you?" Kate asked, concern evident in her voice. Marcus had laughed at that. "Kate, Sarah's the one person who has never made me feel disabled. When she looks at me, she sees Marcus the tech nerd who makes bad jokes, not Marcus the guy in the wheelchair." Gradually, their families began to see what Sarah and Marcus had known from the start: that love doesn't care about physical abilities or skin color. Linda finally agreed to meet Marcus, and his warm personality and obvious devotion to Sarah won her over. Even Kate had to admit that the way Sarah looked at her brother had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with love. As summer turned to fall, Sarah and Marcus created their own world together. They had regular movie nights where they took turns choosing films, competitive board game sessions that often ended in playful arguments, and quiet evenings where they simply enjoyed each other's presence. They were breaking down barriers, not just for themselves, but for everyone who saw them together. 18 months flew by like pages in a wind-blown book. Sarah and Marcus had settled into a comfortable rhythm that made their different backgrounds and challenges seem less important with each passing day. Their love had grown stronger, like a tree putting down deep roots. One sunny morning, Sarah arrived at Marcus's office to find him surrounded by excited employees. His technology startup, Adapt Tech Solutions, had just won a major contract to develop accessible software for public schools. The company he had built from his wheelchair was now becoming a success story that others talked about. "You should have seen him in the meeting," his business partner, Tom, told Sarah privately. "Those school board officials came in looking doubtful about working with a disabled CEO. They left looking like they'd just seen a miracle. Marcus showed them things about adaptive technology that they never even imagined." Sarah beamed with pride. She had watched Marcus work late nights and weekends to make his dream come true. While other couples went on fancy dates, they'd often spend evenings in his home office, Sarah bringing him coffee while he coded, both content just to be near each other. Their own special traditions had developed naturally. Every Wednesday became their cooking adventure night, where they tried to make dishes from different countries. Marcus had installed a special lowered counter in his kitchen so he could help with the preparations from his wheelchair. Their attempts weren't always successful. Their first try at sushi had been particularly memorable for all the wrong reasons, but they always ended up laughing together. Sunday afternoons were reserved for what they called their wheelchair wanderings. Sarah would pack a picnic, and they would explore different parks and trails that were wheelchair accessible. Marcus had shown her how to see the world differently, to notice the small things that made places either welcoming or challenging for people with disabilities. "You've changed how I think about everything," Sarah told him one evening as they watched the sunset from their favorite park bench, her sitting beside his wheelchair. "Even at work, I noticed things I never did before. Yesterday, I suggested changes to make the hospital rooms more accessible." Marcus reached for her hand. "And you've changed how I think about myself," he replied. "Before you, I was focused on proving I could succeed despite my disability. With you, I've learned it's okay to just be me, wheelchair and all." Their families had also grown closer. Linda, Sarah's mother, who had once been so worried about their relationship, now invited Marcus over every Sunday for dinner. She had even learned to cook some of his favorite dishes, though she still insisted on fussing over him like he was a child who needed extra attention. Marcus's sister Kate had become one of Sarah's closest friends. The two women often went shopping together, and Kate had admitted that she'd been completely wrong about her initial doubts. "I've never seen Marcus so happy," she told Sarah. "You don't just love him, you understand him." What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had been planning something special. He had been meeting secretly with his doctors and physiotherapists, working on a surprise that would have to stay hidden for many months to come. But he had another surprise planned first, one that couldn't wait much longer. On their regular date night, instead of going to their usual restaurant, Marcus's driver took them to the rooftop of his office building. Sarah gasped as they emerged from the elevator. The entire rooftop had been transformed with twinkling lights and flowers. Their closest friends were there, holding cameras and smiling widely. Marcus guided his wheelchair to the center of the rooftop, where a small table held a covered silver dish. His hands shook slightly as he reached for it, his usual confidence wavering for just a moment. When he lifted the cover, instead of food, there was a small velvet box. "Sarah Jenkins," he said, his voice strong and clear in the evening air, "you've shown me that love knows no boundaries. Would you continue breaking down barriers with me as my wife?" The ring inside the box sparkled, but not as brightly as the tears in Sarah's eyes as she said yes. Their friends cheered as she leaned down to kiss him, neither of them caring who was watching. They had already proven that true love could overcome any obstacle. Now they were ready to start their next chapter together. Planning a wedding should have been the happiest time in Sarah and Marcus's lives, but it came with its own set of challenges. Every wedding vendor they visited had the same look of surprise when they walked, or in Marcus's case, wheeled through the door. Some tried to hide their confusion, while others weren't so subtle. "I'm sorry, but our venue might be difficult for your situation," one wedding planner said, looking uncomfortable. Sarah felt her temper rising, but Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Our situation is that we're in love and want to get married," Marcus replied calmly. "Now, shall we talk about how to make your beautiful venue accessible for all our guests, or should we take our business elsewhere?" The wedding planner quickly changed her attitude, and soon they were discussing ramps, elevator access, and ways to make sure every guest could fully enjoy the celebration. It became a pattern. Initial awkwardness followed by understanding, as people realized that love doesn't care about wheelchairs or skin color. Sarah's mother, Linda, threw herself into the wedding preparations, though she still had moments of worry. One evening, while they were looking at wedding dresses, she pulled Sarah aside. "Baby, are you absolutely sure about this?" Linda asked, her eyes full of concern. "Marriage is hard enough without extra challenges. What about having children? What about taking care of him as you both get older?" Sarah looked at her mother with determination in her eyes. "Mom, Marcus takes care of me just as much as I take care of him, and we'd already talked about children. There are many ways to build a family. What matters is that we love each other." Meanwhile, Marcus was facing his own family's concerns. His older brother James, who handled the family's financial matters, came to his office one day with a stack of papers. "You need a prenup," James insisted, placing the documents on Marcus's desk. "Your company is growing, and you need to protect yourself." Marcus wheeled himself around his desk to face his brother directly. What I need is for my family to trust my judgment. Sarah's not interested in my money. She's never once asked about it or treated me differently because of it. The papers you need to prepare are the ones making her a full partner in everything I have. The strongest support came from unexpected places. Sarah's co-workers at the hospital organized a beautiful engagement party, decorating the break room and making sure everything was perfectly accessible. Marcus's students from the rehabilitation center made a touching video about how their teacher's relationship proved that love could overcome any obstacle. Kate, Marcus's sister who had once been skeptical, now became their biggest defender. At a family dinner, when a distant aunt made a comment about mixed marriages, Kate shut her down so quickly that the aunt didn't dare speak another word all evening. As the wedding day grew closer, Sarah and Marcus focused on creating a ceremony that represented both of them. They chose a beautiful garden venue that Marcus's company helped make fully accessible. The color scheme would blend their favorites, Sarah's deep purple and Marcus's navy blue. They wrote their own vows, promising to face whatever life brought them together. What nobody knew, except for Marcus's closest friends and his physical therapist, was that he had a special surprise plan for the ceremony. 3 times a week, while Sarah worked night shifts at the hospital, Marcus went to secret therapy. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself was celebrating Sarah and Marcus's special day. The garden venue looked magical, with purple and navy blue flowers decorating the wheelchair-accessible paths. White chairs were arranged in a semicircle, leaving a wide center aisle for easy movement. In the bridal suite, Sarah sat in front of a mirror while her mother Linda carefully placed the veil in her dark curls. Her wedding dress was a beautiful ivory creation that flowed like water when she moved. The seamstress had designed it specially so it wouldn't get caught in Marcus's wheelchair during their first dance. "You look like an angel," Linda said, her eyes filling with tears. "Your father would have been so proud today." She placed her hands on Sarah's shoulders and looked at their reflection in the mirror. "I was wrong before, about Marcus. I've never seen you so happy, baby." Sarah reached up to squeeze her mother's hand. "I know, Mom, and thank you for everything you've done to make today perfect." Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Marcus was getting ready with help from his best man Tom. His navy blue suit had been carefully tailored to look perfect whether he was sitting or, although only Tom knew this, standing. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his purple tie. "Everything's ready," Tom assured him, knowing Marcus was thinking about his surprise. "The guys know exactly what to do. Just focus on your beautiful bride." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. "I still can't believe she chose me," he said quietly. "Out of all the men she could have had, she chose the guy in the wheelchair." "She chose the guy with the biggest heart and the sharpest mind," Tom corrected him. "The wheelchair doesn't even factor into it." Outside, guests were arriving. The rehabilitation center kids, now teenagers, came early to help show people to their seats. Sarah's hospital colleagues sat on one side, while Marcus's tech company employees filled several rows on the other. Both families, despite their initial doubts, were in the front rows, some already dabbing at their eyes. Marcus wheeled himself down the aisle first, looking handsome and nervous at the same time. He positioned himself near the flower-covered arch where they would say their vows. His sister Kate, who was one of the bridesmaids, gave him a quick thumbs up from her position. The music changed, and everyone turned to watch the bridal party enter. The bridesmaids walked in wearing purple dresses, carrying white and blue flowers. Sarah's little niece came next, spreading flower petals along the smooth path that had been specially prepared for Marcus's wheelchair. Then the wedding march began to play, and Sarah appeared at the entrance with her brother James, who was giving her away. There was a collective gasp from the guests. She looked radiant, her dark skin glowing against the ivory dress, her smile brighter than the sun overhead. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat when he saw her. In that moment, all his nervousness about his surprise disappeared. Nothing mattered except the fact that this amazing woman was about to become his wife. As Sarah walked down the aisle, she looked only at Marcus. She didn't see the chairs or the wheelchair or the careful arrangements that had been made to accommodate it. She saw only the man she loved, the person who had shown her what true strength looked like. When she reached the altar, Sarah's brother placed her hand in Marcus's, just as they had practiced. The minister smiled at them both and began to speak about love that knows no boundaries, about hearts that see beyond physical limitations, about souls that connect despite all odds. Sarah and Marcus barely heard the words. They were lost in each other's eyes, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here. The doubt they had faced, the challenges they had overcome, the love that had grown stronger with each test. The garden was quiet except for the minister's voice and the occasional sniff from emotional guests. Even the birds seemed to be watching silently as this special moment unfolded. No one knew that in just a few minutes, they would all witness something extraordinary, a surprise that would make this unique wedding even more memorable. The time came for Sarah and Marcus to exchange their vows. Sarah went first, her voice clear and strong despite the tears of joy in her eyes. Marcus, you showed me what true strength looks like. When the world saw limitations, you showed possibilities. When others saw differences, you showed love. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face every challenge by your side, and to love you more each day than the day before. Marcus squeezed her hands tightly as he began his vows. Sarah, you saw me for who I am, not what I sit in. You never tried to fix me because you never saw me as broken. Your love made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. He paused, taking a deep breath. And speaking of strength, he gave a small nod to Tom and his other groomsmen. The guests watched in confusion as the men moved to stand beside Marcus's wheelchair. Sarah looked puzzled, still holding Marcus's hands. Sarah, Marcus continued, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. From the day I met you, I wanted to be the best man I could be for you. For months, I've been working on a surprise, something everyone said might be impossible. Slowly, with Tom and the groomsmen providing support, Marcus began to move. First, his legs shifted, planting his feet firmly on the ground. Then, gripping the arms of his wheelchair, he started to push himself up. A collective gasp went through the crowd as they realized what was happening. Sarah's free hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she watched her soon-to-be husband do what many thought he never would again. He was standing up. It wasn't easy. Marcus's arms trembled with effort and sweat appeared on his forehead. But his determination was stronger than any physical challenge. After months of secret physical therapy sessions, countless hours of exercise, and sheer willpower, he was standing at his wedding. The garden was absolutely silent except for a few sniffles from emotional guests. Linda, Sarah's mother, was openly crying. Kate, Marcus's sister, had her hands clasped over her heart, tears running down her cheeks. I wanted, Marcus said, his voice strained but proud, to look into your eyes on our wedding day, standing as your equal, even if just for a moment. Sarah was overwhelmed. This man, who had already shown her countless times how strong he was, had pushed himself beyond what anyone thought possible just to share this moment with her. She stepped closer, carefully supporting him along with the groomsmen. The minister, who had been informed about the surprise, quickly continued with the ceremony. Do you, Marcus Thompson, take Sarah Jenkins to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Marcus said firmly, standing tall despite the effort it took. And do you, Sarah Jenkins, take Marcus Thompson to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Sarah managed to say through her tears of joy. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Their first kiss as a married couple was unlike any other. They were at the same height, eye to eye, heart to heart. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. Even the wedding photographer was wiping away tears as she captured this incredible moment. After the kiss, Marcus carefully lowered himself back into his wheelchair, exhausted but beaming with happiness. Sarah knelt beside him, not caring about her beautiful dress, and kissed him again. You amazing, wonderful man, she whispered. How long have you been planning this? Since the day I proposed, Marcus replied, touching her cheek gently. My doctors found some movement in my legs a few months ago. It's not a full recovery. I'll still need the wheelchair. But I wanted to give you this moment, to show you that with you by my side, I can do anything. As they turned to face their cheering friends and family, both Sarah and Marcus knew that this was just the beginning of their story. They had proven that love truly knows no boundaries, and that with determination and support, even the impossible could become possible. During the wedding reception, Sarah and Marcus sat at their beautifully decorated table, surrounded by love and joy. The garden venue had been transformed for the evening celebration, with twinkling lights hanging from the trees and candles glowing on every table. But Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened during the ceremony. I still can't believe you kept this secret from me, she said, holding Marcus's hand tightly. All those late meetings and work emergencies. Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. Those were my therapy sessions. It all started during a regular checkup 6 months ago. Dr. Peterson noticed some unusual movement in my legs during the examination. As their guests enjoyed dinner, Marcus told Sarah the whole story. After that checkup, he had gone through extensive testing. The doctors discovered that his spinal cord injury wasn't as complete as they had originally thought. There was a small chance he could regain some movement with intensive therapy. But why didn't you tell me? Sarah asked, her eyes filled with emotion. I could have been there to support you through it all. Because I wanted to give you this gift, Marcus replied. And honestly, I wasn't sure it would work. The doctors said the chances were small. I didn't want to get your hopes up. Tom, who had been sitting nearby, joined their conversation. You should have seen him working, Sarah, 3 times a week, sometimes for hours. Even when he was exhausted or in pain, he never gave up. The physical therapist, Dr. Martinez, who had been invited to the wedding, came over to congratulate them. Marcus was the most determined patient I've ever had, she said. He pushed himself to the limit every session, always focusing on today's goal. Sarah learned that Marcus had built a special exercise room in his office building, telling everyone it was a new accessible gym for employees. That's where he had spent countless hours strengthening his muscles, training his body to remember movements it hadn't made in years. The first time I moved my toes, Marcus told her, I cried. It was just a tiny movement, but it meant there was hope. Each small victory after that gave me more determination. Linda, Sarah's mother, who had overheard the conversation, wiped tears from her eyes. Now I understand why you were so confident about the future, she said to Marcus. You weren't just brave, you were working on a miracle. Marcus shook his head modestly. It's not a complete recovery, he explained. I'll still need my wheelchair most of the time. Standing up takes a lot of effort and energy. But knowing I can do it sometimes, especially for special moments like today, means everything. Kate brought over a small photo album she had put together secretly. It showed Marcus's journey through therapy, the first time he moved his toes, the day he managed to stand for a few seconds, the hours of exercise and determination. Sarah looked through it with tears in her eyes, seeing all the work her husband had done without her knowing. The hardest part was keeping it from you, Marcus admitted, especially on days when the therapy was really tough. I wanted to share my progress with you so badly. But seeing your face today, when I stood up, that made all the secret-keeping worth it. The wedding guests had started asking for speeches, but first, Marcus had one more surprise. With help from Tom and his therapist, he stood up once more. This time, Sarah stood with him, supporting him as he faced their friends and family. Everyone here today witnessed something special, Marcus said, his voice strong despite the effort of standing. But the real miracle isn't that I can stand sometimes now. The real miracle is finding someone who loves you completely, wheelchair or not. Someone who sees past every limitation to who you really are. Sarah wiped happy tears from her eyes as their guests applauded. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Marcus's determination had shown her once again why she had fallen in love with him, not because of what he could or couldn't do, but because of who he was in his heart. As they shared another kiss, both standing together in front of everyone they loved, Sarah and Marcus knew they had given their guests more than just a wedding celebration. They had shown them what true love and determination could achieve. 6 months after their memorable wedding, Sarah and Marcus had settled into a happy routine in their new life together. Their story had spread throughout Atlanta, inspiring others and changing minds about what was possible with love and determination. On this particular morning, Sarah watched proudly as Marcus gave a speech at the grand opening of their new community center. The building, funded by Marcus's company, was specially designed to be fully accessible for people with all types of disabilities. But it was more than just an accessible space, it was a symbol of their shared dream. When I met Sarah, Marcus told the crowd from his wheelchair, I thought I knew what was possible and what wasn't. She taught me that possibilities are endless when you have the right person by your side. He glanced at his wife, who stood nearby with happy tears in her eyes. Today, we're not just opening a building. We're opening doors of opportunity for everyone. The community center had everything, a technology training room like the one where they first met, a medical clinic where Sarah volunteered on weekends, and a physical therapy center that offered free services to those who couldn't afford them. Dr. Martinez, who had helped Marcus with his wedding surprise, was now the head therapist. Their families had become one big, happy unit. Linda, Sarah's mother, now spent Sunday afternoons teaching cooking classes at the center, showing people in wheelchairs how to navigate the kitchen safely. She had become one of the strongest advocates for disability rights in their community. Marcus's sister Kate ran the center's job training program, helping people with disabilities find meaningful work. She often told people about how wrong she had been about Sarah and Marcus's relationship, using their story to challenge others' prejudices about both disability and interracial marriages. "You two have changed so many lives," Kate told them during the center's opening celebration. "Not just with this building, but with your example. People see you together and realize love doesn't care about color or ability. It only cares about what's in your heart." Marcus continued his therapy, making slow but steady progress. He could now stand for longer periods, though he still used his wheelchair most of the time. Sarah supported him through every session, celebrating each small victory as if it were as big as their wedding day surprise. Their home had become a gathering place for friends and family. They hosted regular game nights where everyone was welcome. Marcus's tech company employees, Sarah's hospital colleagues, their families, and people from the community center. The sound of laughter and friendly competition often filled their accessible home. One evening, as they sat on their back porch watching the sunset, Sarah shared some exciting news. "The adoption agency called today," she said, squeezing Marcus's hand. "They think they've found a match. A little girl who needs a home. She's in a wheelchair too." Marcus's eyes lit up with joy. They had decided to start their family through adoption, wanting to give a home to a child who needed one. The fact that their potential daughter also used a wheelchair seemed like fate. "She's 6 years old," Sarah continued, "and she loves computers, just like you." They said her face lit up when they told her about us. Marcus pulled Sarah onto his lap in the wheelchair, something they often did during quiet moments together. "We'll show her that having a wheelchair doesn't stop you from having an amazing life," he said. "Just like you showed me." Their love story had become more than just about them. It had grown into a movement, inspiring others to look past surface differences and see the person within.